5.6 Manifestations. Welcome back. In the first video of Chapter 5, I called Silent Hill 2 one of the most psychological and metaphor-heavy installments of the entire Silent Hill series, and I'm sure the previous videos have already amply demonstrated this deeply psychological layer of Silent Hill 2, but there are still a few points I would like to cover in more detail, and among these are the various manifestations that can be found throughout the game. We touched upon some of them already, but this video, as well as the following one, will be dedicated to a few more concrete examples of such manifestations. So let's begin with 5.6.1 Regular Monsters. When James arrives in Silent Hill, he is initially greeted not by monsters but by completely empty streets, a town seemingly devoid of any signs of life. This absence of life in a place that should be filled with it is an unnatural and creepy situation that can make you extra susceptible to any kind of noise or movement within the deserted areas you're exploring. Fittingly, the first monster that James encounters is initially only shown as a vague silhouette that's moving away from him, thus adding more fuel to the feeling of unease that such an otherwise empty and lifeless environment can evoke. But once we have met and defeated the first creature, the streets of Silent Hill are suddenly inhabited by many more grotesque monsters. In terms of gameplay, the appearance of such monsters is of course not exactly surprising, as most games, and not just video games, are built around the concept of having some form of opponents or obstacles to overcome. In this regard, Silent Hill 2 follows the fairly common pattern of having normal enemy types that reappear frequently and can either be fought or evaded if they are slow enough and there is enough space, as well as unique enemies that need to be defeated in order to progress the game in what is often referred to as a boss battle. Now, in horror games in particular, enemies often have a few more functions than to merely test the player's skills, as they are supposed to intimidate us and to contribute to the scary atmosphere. And since the creation of fear in Silent Hill 2 is closely intertwined with psychological elements, it's no surprise that most of the monsters in this game are actually manifestations born from James' psyche. And this is also reflected in their very design, as confirmed by monster designer Ito Masahiro himself, who once explained that when he worked on designing creatures in Silent Hill 2, he made them have appearances related to the true meaning of James' journey, because they are something like illusions from his subconscious. Now, for the regular monsters, I would like to give you 3 concrete examples of this. Number 1. The Lying Figure. The very first enemy we encounter in the game resembles a human who has been enveloped in some kind of slimy, skin-like material. In Konami's book Ushinawareta Kyoku, this creature is described as follows: Mogaki kurushimu kanja o imeiji shita sonzai, James no kunou no araware de mo aru. Ushinawareta Kyoku is part of an official Silent Hill 3 guide from Konami and contains various background information on the first 3 games, including its creatures. But now back to the topic at hand. The monster's description that I just quoted could be translated as: the creature is based on the image of a patient squirming in agony. It is also an expression of James' mental suffering, thus making it clear that this monster is definitely linked to James' mental state. And with the second type of regular monster that I want to show you here, Konami's book Ushinawareta Kyoku gets even more explicit. But first, let's talk about James' first encounter with it. So, the first encounter with this creature takes place in the abandoned apartment complex. In one of the rooms, James finds a flashlight attached to a mannequin. Upon closer inspection, the player may realize that this mannequin is actually wearing the exact same clothes that Mary is wearing in some cutscenes, and on a photo that James has of her. And James himself actually seems to notice that there's something special about the mannequin, because when you examine it, he will say, "Tada no mannequin da, demo kono fuku wa," which translates to just a mannequin, but these clothes. A quick fun fact, by the way, the Silent Hill fandom wiki points out that both Mary's and Laura's outfit are most likely based on characters from the movie Con Air. Anyway, as soon as James has taken the flashlight, a creature that had been lying on the floor behind the mannequin gets up to attack him. And this creature has a pair of skinny female legs and a curvy set of hips, but the grotesque thing is that there's no upper body above it. Instead, it is followed by another set of hips and another pair of female legs that it uses to attack. Konami's book Ushinawareta Kyoku calls this creature Mannequin and defines it as James no sei ni taisuru shoudo ya kakushitsu ga gugenka shita mono, which could be translated as the embodiment of James' sex drive and of his conflicted feelings towards sex. So, reduced to nothing but skinny legs and curvy hips, these monsters can be interpreted as a manifestation of his repressed sex drive, of his repressed lust for a seductive body and sexual stimuli, since both James and Mary could no longer be intimate with each other when the illness caused her to become bedridden, depressed, weak, and disfigured. The name of the creature is also quite fitting in this regard, since mannequins are literally objectified bodies that can be used however you want and often possess an idealized shape. This scene of the first encounter with the creature also allows for a few interesting interpretations. First of all, we have Mary, who offers a light to James. Since the letter that brought James here in the first place has supposedly been written by Mary, one could say that in James' case, the town uses Mary as a means to bring repressed thoughts and memories back to his conscious mind. From that point of view, we here have Mary who offers a light to James so that he can illuminate the monsters sleeping in his unconscious mind and find his way through Silent Hill towards the truth. Alternatively, you could also say that the whole scene represents James stealing the light of life from Mary, an act that was supposed to make him free again, since taking her life meant that he was no longer obligated to care for her, and that would therefore also allow his sex drive, represented by the monster, to become active again. Of course, both of these are just hypothetical interpretations, and there's no proof that any of this was the conscious intent of the developers, but I always found these two possible interpretations of the whole scene quite interesting, so I wanted to share them with you. But okay, there is one more normal enemy that I want to talk about, and that is the bubblehead nurse. These nurses can be found in the hospital amongst other places. Please note that the Otherworld version of the hospital has a special version of these nurses whose appearance differs from the normal bubblehead nurse, but I am going to talk about the normal version here. So, first of all, their somewhat provocative appearance, wearing a miniskirt and clearly showing some cleavage, could once again be related to James' repressed sexual urges. But they also contain some more subtle and fascinating design choices that have been confirmed and explained by monster designer Ito Masahiro himself. For one, their face is covered by a kind of rubber mask filled with a liquid. This makes their heads look swollen, which is representative of Mary's swollen head during her illness. And their constant head shaking comes from the fact that this liquid is suffocating them, which in turn also represents Mary's swollen head suffocating under the pillow that James used to kill her. Furthermore, they have a red mouth attached to their face, which stands for Mary's shrieking insanity caused by her illness and the verbal abuse she sometimes hurled at James when he visited her. Finally, as shown in this picture revealed by Ito, part of their head is actually shaped like a baby, which is a reference to the fact that James and Mary originally wanted to have a child together before the disease made this impossible. In another tweet, Ito explains that the game ended up never explicitly mentioning their desire to have children, but he still put it into the bubblehead nurse's design. Okay, next, let us talk about two of the boss fights. The first example in this regard will be the boss fight against a particular set of creatures that attack James in the hospital when he is locked in a dark room by Laura. Each of these creatures consists of a frame hanging from the ceiling with an undefined lump of meat inside. At the bottom of this grotesque mass, two legs can be seen with a mouth in between them that sports a pair of huge smacking lips. In Konami's book Ushinawareta Kyoku, this creature is given a fairly unambiguous name. It is called Nikuyoku Tekina Kuchibiru, which means lips of carnal desires, or simply lustful lips. The book goes on to explain, "Betto o imi suru koushi ya kafukubu ni ichi suru kuchi wa meari o shouchou shiteiru," which could be translated as, "The frame represents a bed, and this frame as well as the mouth located in the lower abdomen are symbols of Mary." When Mary became bedridden, her face swelling up, her outward appearance deteriorating, any intimacy between the two replaced by passivity, helplessness, and even hostility, James himself must have felt not just sad and hopeless, rather it's quite likely that feelings of disgust and frustration welled up inside of him as well, whether he liked it or not. In that regard, this creature could be an expression of the repressed negative emotions that James must have involuntarily felt towards Mary's deteriorating outward appearance and her crippled sexuality that were caused by her disease. In other words, the grotesque mass of meat within the frame could refer to Mary, who eventually became disfigured due to her illness and was quite literally reduced to a lump of flesh confined to a sickbed. Similarly, the lips between the creature's legs could be a reference to female genitalia and stand for the fact that James was no longer able to gain sexual satisfaction from her. These lips are sick and deformed, and instead of bringing pleasure, they belong to a creature that inflicts pain onto James. And there's another level to these lips that's basically the same as the mouth attached to the bubblehead nurses, since we can also find a tweet by Ito Masahiro where he explains that lips in Silent Hill 2 are reflections of Mary's mouth, which abused James, referring again to the fact that Mary would sometimes spew hurtful words at James when her terminal illness made her lash out even at people whom she loved. Another example of a monster born from the psyches of those that visit the town is provided by a creature we have already talked about, namely the creature that tries to assault Angela in the labyrinth and then turns on James, prompting a boss fight against it. It looks like two people under a bedsheet, with the person above forcing themselves on the person below, and as mentioned before, this is a manifestation of Angela's traumatic abuse that she suffered at the hands of her own father and brother, seen through the psyche of James. Now, in Konami's book Ushinawareta Kyoku, this creature is actually given a name that almost feels like a sick joke, all things considered, as it is called Riso Teki Chichioya, which means ideal father. The book then goes on to say, Betto no yona hakogata no ue ni oikabusaru nitai no nikkae, Angela no kako o souchou shiteiru, which means 2 lumps of meat covering a bed-like box. They symbolize Angela's past. Alright, we have reached the end of this video, in which I gave a few examples of normal monsters as well as boss fight monsters that should be considered manifestations born from James' mind, and Angela's as well in the case of the last one. In the next 2 videos we will take a look at 2 more manifestations, namely Pyramid Head and Maria. I hope to see you then, and as always, take care and goodbye.